So the first bit goes, I really like what I see. He's talking about Ange Postecoglou. He says, I really like what I see and I believe they are going in the right direction. They have a proper football style and mentality. And I think Postecoglou brought exactly that the club needed at this moment, freshness and a new fan expectation. That's probably why I felt really heavy when we were with Jose or Antonio. It was a different football style. As long as you keep winning, there is no problem. But as soon as you start to lose 1 or 2 games, the fans get even more frustrated, and you can feel it at the stadium, especially under Mourinho and Conte. Ange has a great personality, and I think he's building something important. Everything can change from one day to another, but I think the team has character, a personality to keep growing, and I think they're going to compete for trophies this season like a League Cup. Then he says, when you look at the last 3 years, Spurs have been really active in the transfer market, investing lots in new players on freshness, and that's what the club needed to create a new dynamic. And then he says, after Champions League final, the club was not ready to invest. Well, we'll just get into that bit in a bit, but yeah, I mean, I guess it's not much in that, but, you know, it's good what he's saying, that he can see it as a professional footballer, that he thinks the club are going in the right direction under Ange Postecoglou being a former captain of the club as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear from him about where the club were under Mourinho and Conte, and how he could feel the frustrations from the crowd. And this is also someone who came in, obviously AVB was there, and then it got switched to Pochettino, who obviously brought in a new style of play, a new exciting brand of football. And the crowd, he could see the crowd were clearly getting on side and were happy with what they're seeing. And maybe he's seeing similarities to, you know, the start of Pochettino to now, where it's been a complete switch up, because you've got to remember AVB was pretty dire football as well, and you know, Pochettino was a breath of fresh air, and maybe he's seeing similarities with Postecoglou. That's why it excites him a bit.
Because there was also, because I know there's a bit of tension in the air with Spurs fans and Ange at the moment, with the way you know, it's up and down and up and down and up and down. There was something similar to that with Pochettino as well at some point, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was getting towards the end of the final year of it, wasn't it? It was.
No, I'm talking about in the early stages.
Oh no, yeah, I remember at one point, sorry, back to the early stages, until Harry Kane scored that deflected goal against Aston Villa. There were murmurings, people were getting unhappy and discontented, but then obviously that free kick went in. The rest is history. I think what I'll take from there as well, obviously, same with the fans getting on the feeling the pressure and getting to them. During that time with Conte and Mourinho, it's when we had all this talk, and the tail end of Poch with the bad eggs, the people that didn't want to commit, the bad. They just weren't doing what the manager said, and obviously we chuck managers under the bus. But when your captain speaks out, and obviously thankfully Hugo has come out with things, we had the managers, and those two were win now managers, weren't they? And the thing is, for me, as I always said, they were never ever going to get what they needed to win now, where they have other teams, and obviously that reflected in performances.
Yeah, we'll get into the quotes about Antonio and Jose, but I was actually thinking about this yesterday, about the jobs that Antonio and Jose both did at the clubs. I mean, wasn't too bad, was it? I think they get like a bad rap for the clubs the jobs that they did here. But when Antonio was sacked, he was a few points off top 4. You never know what could have happened if he stayed on. But it was getting pretty toxic, and he was falling out with people left, right, and centre. But he was very close to the top 4. The season before, obviously, he did. That's probably the best moment as a Spurs fan, probably since Pochettino left the club. Jose Mourinho, he got sacked a few days before a cup final. If he gets to take that cup final and wins it, you know, you're probably talking about 2 successful tenures at the club.
I mean, was one day Ramos' tenure successful?
Well, he won a trophy, and
was
people
it
look back
successful?
In terms of winning a trophy, yeah.
Was it so he had a successful tenure at the club?
Well, for winning a trophy, yeah.
One day Ramos.
Yeah.
The guy who got 2 points from 8 games.
Yeah,
it was not a disaster.
2 points from 8 games was a disaster, but the trophy was absolutely brilliant.
I'm not saying the trophy wasn't brilliant. I mean, you wouldn't hire him again, would you?
No, I wouldn't hire him again.
Because he was a disaster.
I wouldn't hire Jose and Conte again, but looking back on it, in hindsight, their jobs wasn't a disaster.
Conte, I would agree that, but results-wise, he did okay. And obviously, I think the football, especially in the second season, wasn't good, and it really decreased. But he was still able to somehow get results to keep us competitive in that top 4 race. And before that Southampton game, I think if we would have won that Southampton game, we would have gone 3rd at that time. albeit teams around us had games in hand. But I think that just goes to show, whatever you want to say about Conte, he could still get results. Jose was a bit different. He'd completely fallen away from the top 4 race at that point. We'd absolutely embarrassed ourselves against Zagreb as well in the Europa League. Yes, he could have got that cup final. We could have won it, but I don't think that would have made his tenure successful. Just would have meant we got a cup. But I think that would have been great for sure. Don't get me wrong. I would have been delighted with it. It doesn't mean he had a successful tenure, because he would have been, I think we would have finished very much mid-table, and, you know, embarrassing ourselves like we did in Europa League is no way for us to be proud of our team. So I think Jose, you know, he was top of the league for a time in that season, but it definitely fell flat a lot worse for him than it did for Conte, I think.
I do agree with that, but if let's say in hindsight, Jose did stay on for the cup and won the cup, right? When one day Ramos was manager and we won the cup, we always go back to 2008 saying the last time we won a trophy. Yep. We look back at it, you know.
But he was terrible manager.
I understand that, but we look back on it with good memories. That cup final, because we won a cup. It's the last time we won a trophy. Nobody thinks about how we fell off for the rest of that season. Nobody talks about that. Everyone talks about us winning the cup. So if Jose Mourinho does go and win that cup, do you think anyone's talking about the Zagreb game and talks about how bad we were actually? In
what sense? Are we talking about who's done a good job with the club, or are we talking about what we remember?
Probably what we remember.
Then yeah, obviously you remember the cup final,
exactly.
but you said but the discussion at the start was if he wins that cup, that means his tenure was successful.
I think it does.
I don't agree. So you said you agree that Ramos's tenure was successful?
No, I'm not saying. Listen, with me, Ramos is always going to be a sticky point. Yes, he's won a trophy, the only one under this reign, but the way he was hired and who he replaced is of massive significance to me. He was never going to succeed, especially the love Martin Jol had for this football club and the fans had for Martin Jol. But the end of the day is we're here to win trophies and win finals. And one day Ramos did win one. It's the only one we've got. If Jose had been given that final, and we all know what he does in finals, and we all know what his record was like against Pep, we wouldn't be talking about this 16 years. We'd be talking, what now, 4 years since we won a trophy? The whole thing with 16 years without a trophy is becoming bigger and bigger.
I'm not saying I don't disagree with any of that.
I think it would have. I think if Jose wins that cup,
he doesn't keep his job.
Whether he keeps his job is another thing. But I think
because his tenure wasn't successful, that's why he doesn't keep his job.
Maybe success is the wrong word. Maybe look back on it with more favourably, basically.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, if he wins a trophy rather than getting sacked before it, then for sure, I agree with that. Because he didn't win a trophy and he got sacked 6 days before it, and of course it's known as a disaster because he didn't have that trophy to look back on. And if he did, then of course we'd look back at different, because he would have had a trophy, but he didn't get that opportunity. We know that.
Anyway, let's carry on with the quotes. After the Champions League final, the club was not ready to invest because there was also the new stadium to pay and there was COVID. Daniel Levy always tried to make the right decision for the club, and we were also a bit unlucky. At our best with Maurizio, we had to compete with Chelsea of Abramovich, the Man City of Guardiola, and the Liverpool of Klopp. It was really tough because it was a club ready to invest 50 million when others were ready to invest 100 million. But I feel we didn't give the highest credit that Maurizio deserved because he brought a new generation of players, Christian Eriksen, Dele Alli, Harry Kane, and many more to a new level. He created something really special in the building. You could feel the unity, and we really enjoyed competing for each other. We brought the club to the next step, but we had 3 finals and we could not score a goal in any of those games. I played 3 finals with Tottenham, 2 League Cups, 2015 and 2021, and a Champions League in which we didn't score a single goal. It was disappointing to have the experience all those emotions and for the adventure to come to an end in such a way. I don't know if everyone in the club and the team realised how difficult it is to reach a final and how hard it is to come back from that. I'm not sure we understood that this was perhaps the only chance in our career to win the Champions League, that the club we played for was not one that was programmed to win it, that we could have avoided ever hearing again the complaint that Tottenham never won anything, that our names might have been engraved in the club's history forevermore. This is what that penalty took from us. Yes, I mean, the words he says about Maurizio, I mean, it's obviously very true. He was a revelation for this club. the way he brought on all these players and made them the best in the Premier League on a shoestring budget as well.
Yep.
The way he did it. I mean, Maurizio, when you look back at his job, I mean, we said it at the time as well, but when you look back at his job, he's a pure magic man. What he did,
of course,
Magician.
And you know, as we had, how many times did we say at the time? He normalized overachievement.
Yeah.
We said it so often when he was our manager, and he was getting top four. Like we even stopped talking about top four. He was getting it so often. Year after year, we were in the.
How many years in a row did you get it?
I think 4 years in a row. 4 years in a row.
How long was he our manager for?
5 years.
For between 2014 and 2019, yeah, so 5 years. And only the first season he didn't get in that top four. We were saying, you know, fans have gotten so used to it, so used to finishing above Arsenal, so used to getting in that top four and being in the Champions League, that we just took it for granted that it was always going to be like that. And I always appreciate you have to strive for more, and that is something important. But you know, the way a lot of fans hounded him out at the time, didn't sit right with me at all. And I obviously wanted him to get some time to turn it around, and because let's be honest, the tough time he hit when he did get sacked, that was probably the first time that the progression under him kind of really dropped heavily. And you know, we didn't instead of giving him time to turn it around, we just decided to cut our losses and go in a different direction with Jose, which is obviously one of the biggest mistakes Levy's ever made, I think, in hindsight. I think it's fair to say. So we've been in the wilderness since then, and you know, at the moment, and just trying to get back to that where, you know, we're trying to build something again rather than how we were under Jose and Conte. It's all geared to short-termism and trying to get players in now to try and win games in the short term, but we didn't have the money that would justify that approach. So it was never going to work. So we're going in a different direction now. Sorry. But yeah, I definitely think Pochettino was a brilliant appointment.
Yeah, unbelievable. And when he talks about the Champions League final as well, like, I know we all say it, like the Champions League final was ruined in the first minute via that penalty. I kind of hate that argument though, because like they get the penalty in the first minute, or was it after 30 seconds or something stupid like that? Like, they've got 90 more minutes. They got 90 more minutes in the game. Like, it's not like the game was just about to finish. If that penalty happens in the last minute, there's a bit of an argument there saying the game was ruined because of it, but it happens in the first minute.
Yeah, and it's another fun. We didn't turn up, did we? Like I said, you don't get me wrong. It was
neither did they.
It was one of the worst Champions League finals, sorry. But you look at it on that day, and the players that were out there. Obviously, there's the great debate: should Kane have started? Should Moore have been given the chance? But there are players in that great team that you mentioned, in those players that Hugo mentioned before, that just didn't show up. And we've wanted players in cup finals to grab the ball by the horns and say, right, I'm going to lead us to victory, I'm going to get us over. And they just were incapable of doing it. Starting that, I hadn't even realised 3 finals, not a single goal.
Yeah.
I mean, when you say you got Harry Kane up front for all 3 of them, and the supporting cast, it's like, how is that possible?
So who are those finals against in the League
Chelsea.
Cup?
Chelsea in the League Cup, City against Mourinho, and
no, isn't he talking about that he played? Oh, yeah. Okay.
and the Champions League final.
Yeah.
But we did have a bunch of semis as well. We had semis against United, semis against Chelsea. We flopped in those.
The semi-final that hurts me the most is probably the Chelsea one when we lost 4-2, because we were brilliant that day.
Yeah,
really good. Like, that's one of the ones that we really showed up for. And then we just kept giving away these goals, and Matic scores a bloody worldie, you know. So frustrating.
But we had opportunities to win trophies, didn't we? And we did. Also, unfortunately, we just couldn't take that extra step. And those performances in the finals were poor, all of them, really.
Yeah.
I mean, the best one was probably maybe the one under Mason, but I don't know. They're all quite poor.
Do you not agree though? Like, I know we've sat here and said it before, Sim, about you know, the Champions League final got ruined in the first minute. I mean, you've got 90 more minutes to show what you're about.
I agree. And I wouldn't say it's an excuse. First of all, it is a terrible decision, though. I'm saying it's no excuse to lose the game, just because you concede in the first minute. But you also got to take into account they were playing the best defensive team in Europe at the time, which is Liverpool in that season. They were a phenomenal team, and if you give the best defence in Europe a 1-0 head start, it's obviously going to make it a lot more difficult. And so it proved, if the game stays at 0-0 and they can't just sit on their lead like they did for 90 minutes, it could have been a very different game. So I did think it changed the dynamic of the game, and it changed it not in Tottenham's favour at all, and it made it a lot harder. And so it proved, and we ended up losing. But you can't sit here after the game and say we conceded in the first minute, so that means that the game was over. It was not over, and I don't think you can't say that we lost 1-0 in the first minute. That's not how football works. As you said, we got the whole game to try and claw our way back, but it doesn't help when you give the best team in Europe a 1-0 head start unjustifiably. Yeah. And that's always going to be difficult to take in, especially when you go and lose the game.
Agreed. And back on his point about, the players, the generation of players that Maurizio brought through. I mean, just looking back on it, the amount of players he made into like some of the best in the Premier League, if not the best in Europe at the time. I mean, I think people under-regard and underestimate how good Christian Eriksen actually was, because he's never in the conversation and the topic for best 10s in the Premier League, right? And when he was at Tottenham, when he was at full pomp, he was, because I think like the way he left Spurs, it's kind of clouded a lot of people's judgment. But when he was at his best, I mean, he was one of the best.
Yeah, and I think as well, since he had, what happened to him at the Euros and he's come back, and he hasn't, I think he's been good. He hasn't quite been as good as he was at Tottenham since then. So I think people forget how good he was at Tottenham. This guy was a machine of chance creating, always near the top of the assists charts. He had a good goal record as well. He scored quite a lot of goals from outside the box, and I think his goal contribution record was really, really special. And I think a lot of people forget when he was younger, in his mid-20s, what a special player, a world-class talent he was. And I agree, when people bring up the conversation of 10s, he's very rarely in there, and he should be.
I'm so the opposite.
Really?
That's not totally opposite. When he first came, I was delighted, and he started off brilliant. Free kicks, exceptional. Corners, brilliant. And then I looked at the season we came second in the league, and the season before and after. For 3 or 4 months, he's untouchable. Absolutely untouchable and unstoppable and incredible. Then he just goes missing. He went missing in the Champions League final. He was one of the poor performers. When the big games come and you want your big players to stand up, I just think he went missing. Towards the end, his conduct was horrific. It got to the point that I used to call him Where's Wally? Because it used to be Where's Eriksen? Because 3 months he'd be exceptional, and then the rest you couldn't find him. Well, on his day, he was great, though. On his day, he was great, but do I think he was a very, very good player for Spurs? Yes. Do I think he is really overrated by his overall performance? Yeah, I do.
I think that's crazy, because I think when you look at the numbers that he pulled out for Spurs, I mean, no, it couldn't have been better, because the numbers that he got, some of the players that you regard as the best could only dream of those kind of numbers. In 4 seasons, he clocked up the best part of, if not just about over 50 assists. I mean, that is nuts. Yeah, 50 assists over the course of 4 seasons.
In the 3 months, it was really, really good.
Come on, man. 50 assists. In 15, 16, 14 assists. In 16, 17, 15, then 10, and then 12. Over the course of those 4 seasons, there were times where he was just unplayable.
Correct. There were times, and there were other times where he was completely missing.
The good definitely outweighs the bad 100%. No doubt about it. I think he was the best 10 by far in that moment in time in the Premier League.
I agree with that. Yeah, there were, I mean, it was a time when there weren't many 10s, but yeah, for sure. He was the best.
Ozil came to Arsenal at that time, and everyone was like, oh, Ozil this, Ozil that. I mean, he's not even fit to lace Eriksen's boots in that moment in time.
Yeah, that I'd say.
But then you got players like Moussa Dembele, the way Poch brought him up, Harry Kane, Dele Alli, phenomenon. I mean, Kyle Walker, Danny Rose, Hugo Lloris himself, Jan Vertonghen, Toby Alderweireld. I mean, all these players, his management skills to get them playing at their absolute peak was just incredible.
Yeah, you mentioned Jan Vertonghen, obviously my love for that man. But you miss out. You know what I also thought was incredible under him was Kieran Trippier.
Very true.
Kieran Trippier was a great find, and what he did with him was brilliant.